Hello, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 4 of the Oxford Wine and Spirit podcast. If you listened to our Open a Bottle episode last week, you'll know that in March 2024, we're celebrating B-Corp Month. And so, today's episode is themed on exactly that. My guest, Sarah Driver, founder and owner at the Rathfinny Wine Estate, has kindly agreed to tell us all about the journey Rathfinny went on in order to achieve their B Corp certification. And so, without further ado, let's hear what Sarah had to say. Sarah Driver, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me today. Before we dive in and talk about all things B Corp, I was wondering if you could give all of our listeners at home a little introduction into yourself and, of course, the Rathfinny Wine Estate.
Well, thank you, Tom, very much for having me on the show. I'm delighted to be here. So Rathfinny Wine Estate is an estate in East Sussex. We're near Eastbourne, and we grow grapes for English sparkling wine. It was started by my husband and myself back in 2010. We bought a 600-acre farm and started from scratch. We planted our first vines in 2012. They are the grapes used predominantly for sparkling wine. So that's Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. We had our first tiny harvest in 2014 that led to our launch in 2018. And that was just 11,000 bottles. We had our full range by 2020, and we became a B Corp last year in 2023. And in that time, we have expanded to sell overseas to lots of different markets, including China, Hong Kong, Japan, Denmark, Italy, going into America and South Korea this year. So that's us in a nutshell.
That's fantastic. I'm sure a lot of our listeners, Rathfinny won't be a stranger to them, particularly if they're regulars in our shops, because they're usually quite prominently on display. But we're here today to talk about B Corp because it's B Corp Month. And I'm fascinated to find out as much as I can about what it means to achieve a B Corp certification. Could you give us a little bit of a background on B Corp and what makes it different to other types of certification that you can find out there?
So B Corp is regarded as probably the highest standard worldwide of certification that you can get. There's lots out there, but right from the start, we set ourselves a very high bar. So what it does is it balances profit with purpose. And so what that means is we actually had to we changed our articles of association, the way we run our business. So we are legally required to consider the impact we have. We have to think not just about our economics, but also our social impact and our environmental impact. So what that means is it takes you on a journey where you have to really look at everything, your impact on your workers, your customers, your suppliers, your community, and the wider environment. So really it's all about using business as a force for good. And the aim is to build a truly sustainable business. And I was looking back on figures, when we started this, I think there were only about 2,000 in the world. There's now over 6,000 B Corps in over 80 countries, covering more than 150 different industries. So it's a very diverse, but a very high standard to achieve.
Do you know when B Corp started?
Do you know? I don't know exactly, but I know it was a kernel of an idea for quite a long time before it actually got to the state that it is now in. And it's an ever-evolving business, because I know they're looking at changing some of their questions and they're involving people in that. And that I'd have a bit to say on that as a winery, to be honest, and in relation to our experience. So, yeah.
Yeah, it must be such a difficult thing to manage from an external point of view when it looks at so many different businesses. I think in the wine industry, we get tied into looking at things like organic and biodynamics just because it has so much to do with the day-to-day production processes in terms of making wine. But stepping back and looking at that in terms of automotive industries, for example, it must be a hard thing to manage, to be honest.
I think so. I mean, I think they probably went on a learning curve as well, because, as a sector, the winery side is quite a small side of it. So, for example, we are the first grower producer of sparkling wine in the world to get B Corp. So it shows you, they too are on a journey. And also, there were some issues, some questions that were obviously slanted towards, say, coffee producers in different countries. So, some of the questions were, are you teaching your staff English? Do you run education programs? I used to get a bit frustrated because it's like, I can't get points on that. So it was really interesting. And also, one of the other things we came across was they used we used a very high standard of carbon counting. So we used a thing called the GHG protocol, the greenhouse gas protocol. And that didn't allow us to take account of all the planting that we had done previously. So we've planted nearly 400,000 vines and 7,000 trees. So most vineyards will say, oh, we're carbon neutral, or we're actually contributing, which we are, but strictly on our measurements, because we set ourselves that standard. We haven't been able to take account of that. And that was quite hard for us.
I think one of the things that I've come across talking to other B Corp producers is that idea about looking internally and seeing what it is that you're doing yourself, and constantly reevaluating what you have to do to keep it. Would you say that's a familiar experience by now?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because we set out really not to do this as a box ticking exercise. It just wasn't like that. And I think one of the things I learned, and I think one of the things that we did well, was that we started from the grassroots up. So this was definitely not, me and management saying, you got to do this. This was immediately, I did a shout out for people and said, are you interested? Do you want to join us? And I think that has given us real strength. But I look back, and we actually started this process in 2019, and we didn't get certification till last year, partly because of COVID and everything that involved. But we've done a lot, but the real work now doesn't sound so exciting when I say it's about embedding it. It's about, living it. It's about recording it. And those are the things that take time, but actually they're the things that make a real difference.
Absolutely. And am I right in thinking that you have to re-apply for certification? Is it every 3 years?
Every 3 years, yeah. So that, again, it's rigorous. So it means you have to embed so that you can prove all of those things. And a lot of the work we did at the beginning was really about establishing baselines, finding out what our carbon count was. We did biodiversity surveys, we did bug life surveys, we monitor our water, loads of things like that.
And what was the initial inspiration to go after this certification? Did that come from yourself?
Yeah, it did. I met on holiday, actually. I met the marketing director at Innocent Smoothies, and we just got talking. I'd never heard about it. So this is back in 2018, I think. And it really chimed with me, because I actually thought, we're doing a lot of those things. So when we started, we put in a wastewater plant. And I think we were one of the first wineries to do that. We built a winery with a green roof. We used the flint off our land in the buildings. We sourced locally and from the UK when we could. We've worked really hard to employ a local workforce. Just say, when we were trying to source locally, just an example was our posts. So you can imagine we've got almost 300 acres under vine now. So the number of posts needed. And we had to import these from abroad. and we wanted to buy them in England. So we spent a lot of time working with post manufacturers. Our vineyard manager would go up, I think it was up in Birmingham or something, and they didn't get it right for a few years. But I do believe now that they are producing them locally in England. So yeah, it chimed because we were always doing these things. But I honestly felt it was the right thing to do. I wanted to work and build that culture. I wanted to benchmark ourselves and hold ourselves accountable. So I brought the idea to the team, and I was really lucky because our vineyard manager, Cameron Roucher, who was with us from the beginning, he's now gone back to Australia. He was from New Zealand, but he was really pro. And having his support was, I couldn't have done it without him, because being in the vineyard, he led on a lot of the environmental things. So that's how we started on this journey.
Amazing. And I've got to ask a cynical question. Is there a benefit to the business for achieving this certification, or is it, would you say, a purely altruistic endeavor?
To be honest, when I started, I didn't think of it as being a benefit for any other reason than wanting to do it. But it has proved to be a massive benefit for lots of different reasons. So it's a really, I think everybody will recognize it. It's sort of a kind of point of conversation now in everything. I think you just have to step inside a wine shop or a restaurant, and people are talking about locally sourcing and their environmental credentials. So it's a really great touch point with lots of people that we work with. Lots of people are really interested in it. When we sell, for example, into Scandinavia, that has the monopoly system, a lot of the tenders there, you can't enter the tender if you don't have a form of certification. And obviously a B-Corp is a very high form of certification. It has other brilliant effects, I think, because it encourages people to want to come and work for companies that are B-Corp, particularly young people. They're looking for companies that have purpose and mission and think about the world in a different way. So I think it's been really beneficial. I think also, if you think about a vineyard and a wine business, we're quite disparate. And this was one of the things that made it very difficult to get our certification, because as a grower producer, we grow all our own grapes. We don't buy any in. So we're an agricultural business with everything that has. We're a manufacturing business because you make wine, you manufacture in the winery. We're a hospitality business. And then behind that, we're an administrative business. So there's lots of different areas to the business. But what being a B Corp has done is it's really brought us closer together. So just from that first shout out, I've got people from every area of the business working together. And some of the knock-on things that it led to was we started a social committee. We started a company newspaper, The Grapevine. So it's had a lot of impact on a practical and personal level to our business.
Really great to hear and really fascinating. I never thought of it in that kind of perspective, basically creating something that binds every aspect of the business. And you mentioned that you were the first grower producer sparkling wine. Are there other wineries that you're aware of who have who are on the path to B Corp, or if they haven't already achieved it?
Yeah, Ridgeview got there before us. So and that's another great thing. Tamara, who leads there, and we've worked together and shared and been collaborative, and that's that's been great. Our distributor, Liberty, they're not B Corp, they're going for it, and we're supporting them on that. But they've got great green credentials and a carbon neutral. There's a community out there.
And looking at the wider audience, and I'm talking about us wine drinkers, what advice would you give to someone who's trying to drink more sustainably?
Well, buy British, buy English sparkling wine. That really is probably one of the best ways you can be more sustainable, is to buy locally, because we're producing some of the world's best sparkling wine. There's no reason not to buy from England. I'm going to plug Sussex because I think Sussex is the place, and Sussex now have a PDO, which means that if you buy a bottle of still or sparkling wine with Sussex on it, as a consumer, you know it has met the very highest standard and an independent review. So, these are all reasons for people to buy their wine from England, particularly English sparkling wine. So that makes a huge difference, I would say.
I can wholeheartedly agree with the English sparkling wine scene. It just seems to get better and better every time I go back, particularly with Rathfinny as well. It seems there's been a real evolution in the structure and the body and the character and the acidity levels. Every vintage, the wines just seem to get better.
That's really, wonderful to hear. And I have to say, it is so heartening. And actually, we always felt that the site at Rathfinny was the perfect site. We're a south-facing slope. We're 3 miles from the coast, which the Romans said was the best place to plant vineyards. So we get a breeze that keeps our fruit really dry. We're on the same band of chalk as Champagne. We used to say, oh, we're on the same band of chalk that comes up from Champagne to England. Now we say they're on the same band of chalk that goes from East Sussex down to Champagne. But what was so encouraging, Mark and I launched our wines in Japan at the end of last year, which is an incredibly sophisticated market. And, we went to a wine shop in Kyoto. It had 60 different bottles of champagne and English sparkling wine. It was phenomenal. You were working with people who really knew, and they loved our wine. It was just really heartening, because we set out on this journey, and you hope you're going to make something fantastic. But it was really lovely to see. So yeah.
Going back to B-Corp,
yeah.
Is there anything you have on the horizon that you think is going to help your B-Corp credentials when it comes to the next time you recertify?
Yeah. So I was reflecting before our interview about, all the things we've done, and I've touched on those, and a lot of those are ongoing. And one of the most amazing things that we managed to do was we worked with the Brighton and Hove Energy Services Cooperative to put in solar panels, and that made a massive difference just to our carbon footprint. It's such a wonderful scheme because we gave them the space. They put the solar panels on our winery buildings. It's a community project, so people get local, cheaper energy, and they buy into it, so they get the profits as well. So that was a win-win. So we're always looking for ways to expand upon that project. We send nothing to landfill now, and we compost everything. And again, we're going to be continuing to work on that. Going forward, we did a lot of baseline work. So we did biodiversity assessments to encourage pollinators. We're working with the South Downs National Project on their Changing Chalk project. We're monitoring nitrates in water. So as farming has a much greater impact with the fertilizers than we do. So we're working with Southeast Water and monitoring the decrease of that. We're continuing always, even just like small things. So in hospitality, those little UHT plastic milk you get in your bedrooms. We don't have those. We provide glass bottles of milk. And there's a role for the public to play as well, because I don't know if you've noticed, but when you go into hotels and things, the lights are always on in the bedroom when you walk in. I know the really modern hotels have got the plastic that you put in and the lights come on. But if you're in England and you're going into... And it's a real battle. So when we take people up to their rooms, we'll turn the lights on and say, we haven't left all the lights on for environmental reasons. So another big win we had was on packaging, and this was huge for us. We did little things like on site, we reuse our boxes as much as we can, taking, wine around the site. And we've tried to eliminate all plastic in our e-com. But the biggest thing we did, we redesigned our cases for bottles of 6, and it led to us reducing cardboard by 25%, which was huge. And even better, it meant we could get 40% more boxes on the pallets. So for distribution of transport, every lorry that goes off the site's taking 40% more wine each journey. So we're continuing to build on these things, and going ahead, we're all about embedding it and recording it and getting people to think about things. And that is a really hard thing to get people are doing it, but we need to record it. So we've done appraisals recently, and embedded into that is, what's your commitment to B Corp? So our brand ambassadors now, they really try and take public transport. They try and get their meetings in areas and close together. They try and share cars and things like that. A couple of other things we're working on. We've got a procurement policy, but we're going to be really embedding that in relation to people we work with. So watch out, we'll be sending out questionnaires. What are you doing? What are your policies? How can we help? How can we work together? So that's a big aim this year. We have a really accessible site, but again, we can do better. So one of the things that came up from B Corp was we started an equality, diversity and inclusion group, which I'm a part of. And we are accessible, but we're looking at ways that we can be even better. Things like, just simple things like big print text and some hearing loops and things like that, just to make it more accessible for people. In fact, if any of your listeners are listening, we could do with some volunteers to come and actually, come to the estate and give us their feedback. Be you in a wheelchair, or I'm getting Mark's goddaughter down because she's blind, to come and see what the experience is like for her. And finally, we're going into countryside stewardship scheme this year. That's really exciting, because if I tell you one of our B Corp unintended consequences, which is quite interesting. So one of the things we tried to do was do inter-row planting that would encourage pollinators. And so we didn't mow in between every row, we did every other row, which also cut down on tractor miles. Wow, win-win, fantastic. Except by about August, all of our team were saying, Sarah, we're really getting bitten by bugs. And we're really getting wet from morning dew, and, what can we do? And it also raised the moisture level, which isn't always great in a vineyard. So that's one of our challenges of how we change that. So a lot of going into countryside stewardship is we're taking that sort of planting to different portions, to meadows. But that's just an example of you're trying to do the right thing and it not always working.
Fascinating.
It is.
I mean, I've spoken to a lot of farmers. It's something that I'm particularly interested in, and I remember speaking to a regenerative farmer and just him telling me about the journey he had to go to, where he said, well, we wanted to have animals, so we let the animals graze and then they ate the grapes. So then we had to train our vines higher. He went into it, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but chickens came in first, followed by sheep, and they had a certain amount of time, and there had to be a certain amount of time in between when they came. And they also couldn't go during certain times of the year because of the cover crops he'd grown. He wanted them to flourish and didn't want the animals to eat them. And so it doesn't just become let's plant cover crops because that, impacts the soil in a better way. You've got to, it's a constant battle to try and find the balance.
It really is. And so we had ponies grazing because chalk downland is I am told that in a square metre of chalk downland soil, you get the greatest variety, not only of plants, but insects. But gorse can overtake it. And so we had these ponies. Well, they just kept escaping and, they'd end up on a golf course. So we do have sheep. We have sheep on site now. But as you've said, we can't have them all year round. But we do have them, which is great. It's great for grazing and it's great for fertilization. But, it's a journey. And I think you've got to be really honest about that. So collecting information to do our carbon count. Luckily, we've done it for 3 years, but it's really hard work and it takes a lot of time. And I've been talking to the company that have been helping us with that. And I'm just going, we've got to be able to do this in a more simple way because people have got jobs to do as well. But I think it's important. It's not box ticking. Be honest about when it doesn't work. Collaborate with others, because if we've seen that, other places will. One of the biggest challenges with a growing business, for example, is our biggest contributor is glass. And there's not a lot we can do about that. And at the moment, there isn't an English supplier of bottles that can take sparkling wine. The pressure, I think it's 6.5 bar or something. And who knew one of the biggest glass makers in Europe was in Ukraine. So that suddenly wasn't available and glass prices went up over 100%. So how do you expand as a business and try and get a zero footprint? And that is a real challenge. One of the things I'm really pleased about is we've just had our report come out for our carbon count. And as I said earlier, having solar dropped us massively. We've gone up a little bit this year, but overall, compared to our revenue's going up, but our carbon count is coming down. But that ultimately, it's really hard. Everyone says, and we've signed up to Race to Zero. How do you get there? And I'm quite suspicious on offsetting, if I'm honest. I'm not sure all the schemes are necessarily what they say they are. So that's going to be a challenge going forward.
What's one of the most innovative strategies you've championed here at Rathfinny?
So I talked about our solar panels, and that really has had a huge effect. But a really innovative thing that we do is we have an electrodialysis machine. And what that does, it's all about cold stabilization. So if any of your listeners have ever bought a bottle which has had some crystals in them, they're not a problem per se to the wine, but they're not great with sparkling wine. You can't have crystals. And the way you get rid of the essentially potassium is you freeze these massive tanks down. But when you've got an electrodialysis machine, you don't have to do that. It all happens. And what it does is it uses 80% less energy. So it's a massive innovation. We got into, if I'm talking about some of the challenges we had on the B-Corp process, we put this forward as a piece of innovation. And they said, oh, that's great, but show us your usage of energy before you had this machine. And we went, oh, no, we've started as we meant to go on. We don't have that data. And although we showed them a lot of academic research and data from elsewhere, unfortunately, they wouldn't accept it on our behalf. So that was a bit disappointing and hard in the process. But ultimately, it's a great piece of kit.
It is interesting, and I suppose it goes back to B Corp having to manage the structure across so many different industries.
Yeah.
And it is one of the cold stabilizations, one of those unromantic terms that nobody ever really talks about. But it happens so much. And really, it's about sort of 6 to 8 days where you're keeping the liquid chilled to a really low temperature, and the amount of energy usage actually to run that sort of refrigeration equipment, I never really thought about how much it would be, but it really would be huge, wouldn't it?
It would be huge. And whereas, this machine, it does it in hours, sort of overnight. It's fantastic. So it's definitely the way to go.
Let's look at the wider picture and talk about fun things coming up for Rathfinny away from B Corp certification in the next year or so. Is there anything you'd like to shout about at this time?
Yes. Well, we've got our 2019 vintages, which are coming on stream at the moment, and they're all delicious. And we're very excited because we've got a new 50cl bottle coming out, the Rathfinny Mini. So this is something we've championed for years and years and are now able to produce in this country. And what the 50cl does, and you talked about drinking more sustainably, the 50cl is the perfect size of bottle because it's got 4 glasses of sparkling wine in it. And I'm a producer of sparkling wine and I love everyone to drink the full bottle. But if I'm honest, sometimes if I open the fridge and I think, oh, what's my favourite drink? I really fancy a glass, or Mark and I between us, but are we going to finish a bottle? So this 50cl is really a perfect size, and that's coming online. You can enter a competition to win one of the first bottles. I think we've got 5,000 at the moment, which we bottled in 2022. So we're really excited about that. And that's a real opportunity, I think, particularly abroad for the English sparkling wine industry to have something really unique. And we know that lots of hotels are interested, lots of people are interested in foreign markets. So that's really exciting coming up. We've also got lots happening on the estate this summer. So if any of the listeners haven't visited us, we're an hour and a half from London. And we've got a new balcony bar opening. We've got a wonderful hut there that you can come and have a glass of sparkling and sit outside. We've got sundowner evenings. We've got really popular Sunday lunches in our Flint barns, which book out so quickly. And in the summer, they're going to be barbecues in the courtyard with live music. One of my favourite events, which I struggle to get a ticket for, is a thing we do called Dine in the Vines. And that is where we lay the tables out down by the vines, and you just sit there in the sun and or in the evening as the sun's going down, and have a wonderful meal. And you can come and stay, obviously, at the Flint Barns. And we've also opened a little cottage, 2-bedroom cottage, if you want to come and explore the area. I always think of East Sussex as sort of a hidden county. A lot of people know West Sussex, people go north, they go, to Cornwall, but East Sussex has just got so much. I do a shout out for Sussex Modern. I don't know, Tom, if you're familiar with that, but
No, not at all.
It's a collaboration between vineyards and art. And the link is the landscape. So the landscape, the chalk and the Sussex landscape, it covers east and west Sussex, draws wineries, but it's also drawn a lot of artists. And so we collaborate with Charleston and the Towner Gallery and Ditchling Museum. And if you go online, you can plan. So you can say, oh, I want to go to Rathfinny for lunch, or I want to go to a vineyard for lunch. I'd like to go to a gallery in the afternoon, and I'd like to have stopped off for coffee at a gallery in the morning. And you can plot it and plan it. So it's fabulous.
Wow. We'll put a link to them down in the comments section, so people can click on that and have a little look if they want to. And that'll be fantastic. Sounds like wonderful stuff, and do you know what? It's just getting me excited for the summer. I'm so fed up of this winter right now.
The rain. I think this has been the wettest February. I think that's what they were saying on the vineyard by a long shot. Yeah, we've had enough.
There we go. Let's have a long summer with just enough rain to keep the vines happy, and then a very dry autumn. How about that?
Yeah, gosh, that would be great.
Fantastic.